Hello, and welcome to the Westmoreland Museum of American Art's virtual programming. We are having some technical difficulties at the moment. We're waiting on our moderator, but I will be filling in until she gets here. So I am Mona Wiley, the Public Programs Manager for the museum. I'm very excited to be your host for the evening, and I really want to thank everybody for joining us on one of many artist talks focusing on the Diversity Billboard Art Project. Tonight you will hear from Susanne Slavick and Ginger Brooks Takahashi, two of the artists involved in the project. The Diversity Billboard Art Project is a public art campaign that will display 10 new works of art by 10 local artists throughout Westmoreland County. The first of the billboards went up on Monday, October 5th, 2020. The artworks are installed on specific billboards along routes 22, 30, 31, 51, 56, 119, 217, and I-76, and they'll be on view at each location for 12 to 24 weeks. The project is generously funded by the Heinz Endowment's Just Arts program, an initiative that supports artists, organizations, and communities who harness the power of the arts to respond to social issues affecting the Pittsburgh region and beyond. The idea of billboards to spread a positive message through art was conceived by the Westmoreland Diversity Coalition's co-founder and Board of Trustees co-chair Carlotta Page, who developed the grant proposal in partnership with the Westmoreland Museum of American Art. Each artist was commissioned to create an original artwork inspired by the theme, "Make Our Differences Our Strengths," that visually conveys how diversity and inclusion can make Westmoreland County communities stronger. For more information on the project, billboard locations, and exhibition schedule, please visit makeourdifferencesourstrengths.com or on Facebook at Make Our Differences Our Strengths. So before we get the conversation going, I'd like to introduce you to the artists, and hopefully Shayla's with us. If not, we'll just get started. So let's bring the artists on. Hello, how are both of you doing today?
Good.
Okay.
All right, so it doesn't seem like Shayla's going to be joining us, but that's okay because you both have an excellent presentation to show everybody about your work. And both of your work is incredibly unique, but fits within the general overview of the Make Our Differences Our Strengths, correct?
Yeah. Sorry.
All right. No, that's fine. We love to see the pets joining the talks. That's always a really great bonus. So how comfortable are you with putting the presentation on screen, and then you just sort of guide us through? Does that work?
I'm ready to go.
All right. Well, I will hand it off to you, and I will just kind of hang out here and observe.
But you're going to advance the slides, right?
Correct. Yeah, okay. We'll advance the slides.
So yeah, I'll just jump right in. I'm Susanne Slavick, and when I first saw the call for this project, this image from Merce Cunningham's film, it's called Beach Birds for Camera. This immediately popped into my head for not just for some reason, but I loved how the black leotard of Martha Skinner's costumes created this kind of enclosure and pronounced a kind of unity in arms, whereas the white part of the leotards pronounced the individuality of each dancer's pose. And so it was a really intuitive connection to the Billboard Project's theme, which is making our differences our strengths. And so it informed my initial design. You know, I really don't typically work with figures, but I did love the abstraction of this shape and its potential meaning, because I've long been interested in the eye, or the almond shape that you might read in this negative space that the arms encircle. And this shape is also called a mandorla, which is that kind of aqua shape that you see there. Mandorla means almond in Italian, and it results when two circles or two worlds or two realms intersect. And you'll see in religious symbolism, you will often find the Christ figure in that almond shape, because he is the bridge or the mediator between two realms of heaven and earth. So, I'm not particularly a religious person, but in earlier drawings like these, I wanted to use that mandorla shape to be a space of intersection between a secular heaven and earth. And you'll see in this detail, you'll see the spokes of the circle that kind of reoccur in the color wheel that eventually got incorporated into my billboard design. So the circle as a kind of abstract form keeps popping up in my work, as you can see here in one of my earlier map paintings. And so I'm just going to do a really breezy whirlwind waltz with the circle across ages and cultures to emphasize diversity over time and place. You know, the circle first, it occurs in nature, but it's also an idealized form in mathematics, and we often use it as a framework to understand and describe our world. This circle, which is kind of squashed a little bit, but it crowns the head of the Egyptian sun god Ra. But we see the circle in sacred Celtic places like Stonehenge. We also see it in Confucian and Taoist icons as two parts spiraling within a circle. And this emblem can also suggest a kind of polarity, which, you know, right now we're all too familiar with, given the current political situation. But yin yang, you know, suggests push, pull, which are opposites, but ultimately there's a kind of codependency and a balance of opposites. We also see the circle in Buddhist mandalas, and these are symbolic diagrams of the universe, so another way to understand our world, though the psychologist Carl Jung also sees these mandalas as mythological representations of the self. We see circles in medieval Jain manuscripts and in Zoroastrianism from ancient Persia. And that, next slide, please. And that tradition of Zoroastrianism, it later influenced Abrahamic and Eastern religious beliefs. So in this Zoroastrian, you have the Fra Vahar symbol, which stands for this ideal moral life. Fra is the direction forward, and Vahar is a direction pulling backward. Again, it's like this yin yang. And the smaller ring that you see here represents a reminder to keep our promises to others. And the bigger circle reminds us that our spirit lives on. So it often represents immortality and infinity. So the circle has represented the divine, as in William Blake's Divine Architect with his compass. And ancient Greeks really saw the nature of God as a circle in which the center is everywhere and the circumference is nowhere. And I love that kind of decentering idea because I think it really informs the Diversity Billboard campaign. The decentering also shows up in this King Arthur's Round Table because this symbolizes the equality of the knights among the knights. And then in this, you see Leonardo using the circle to illustrate supposedly, you know, ideal anatomical proportions. And on the left, you have the 12th century nun Hildegard von Bingen, who painted this cosmic wheel around her notion of universal man. And, you know, I have to say, you know, we now recognize that these kind of Eurocentric representations of white men as universal, those are highly problematic, and it's something that I think all of the billboards have worked to counter. To just continue with other cultures, we have the circling dances of Sufism, which celebrate a love of the universe. That's practiced by 13th century followers of the 13th century Sufi mystic Rumi, who weirdly enough is the best-selling poet in the United States. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around that. But with this tradition, you have the Mevlevi dervishes. Their right hand faces upward to heaven. Their left hand faces down to the world. And again, you have the heart, which is acting as something in between, a medium or a bridge. The left foot is fixed in the dance, and the right makes the body turn around in a circle. And just to give you a glimpse of the kind of poetry that kind of inspires this movement and this dance, here's a fragment. You have said what you are, I am what I am. Your actions in my head here in my hands. With something circling inside, I have no name for what circles so perfectly. So generally you've seen just across this, you know, rapid fire survey, we link circles with origin, perfection, wholeness, infinity, unity, etc. So coming back to my billboard, when I did some further inquiry into Merce Cunningham, I was told that he was not necessarily known for his company's diversity. So I sought out a more contemporary company that was known for that, and this led me to A.P. Johnson's photograph of a 2018 performance called Snap, Crackle, Pop. And this dance choreography was a collaboration between Carolyn Dorfman Dance and Renee Jaworski of Pilobolus. And I altered the light and the color of the figures using a noise filter from Photoshop. And you can see how that filter actually consists of a lot of different colored tiny specks from a fuller spectrum. And the name of my piece is Full Spectrum. But as you pull back, distance optically blends those specks into a monochrome. So it's a seemingly kind of unifying measure that ends up not really denying multiplicity. So I then chose a color wheel, diagramming the full spectrum to insert into that image. And the circular structure of the color wheel kind of inherently avoids privileging one hue over another. It absolutely precludes hierarchy. So in the final version, the linkage of these 9 dancers in my piece, Full Spectrum, it kind of suggests a combined and a connecting energy that has a lot of potential, but I don't see this energy as kind of conferring a heavy or permanent power. I see it rather as a kind of dynamic current for shifting needs and circumstances. And then, in customizing this color wheel for this particular pose, that kind of lost the eye shape a little bit, but I still do see it as an eye of many lenses, allowing for both multiple and singular perspectives. Is it seeing us or are we seeing it? The line between these points of view might dissolve. And so I think of this full spectrum as not supporting any kind of primacy or superiority. There is no possibility for a kind of black and white dichotomy. And instead, I hope that there's a perception and a reality of diversity as strength, especially now. Thank you.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
I really love the watching the circle evolve over time and seeing it in all these unique different ways. So I think Shayla has joined us. Let's see if we can bring her on. There she is. All right. Well, I will let Shayla take over. I'm going to head backstage and watch from there.
Okay. Thank you. I think you're on mute, Sheila. I think you're still on mute. No?
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start. Okay.
Great.
So unfortunately, we don't have any captions live, but they will be added once the video is uploaded to the museum's feed. I will be sharing image descriptions of what I'm showing today, and I will be talking about sex and sexuality in relation to my billboard. All right. A rainbow of arms reaches out to one another. One holds a sign emblazoned with the early gay liberation text, "An army of lovers cannot fail." Another holds a megaphone. Photos of the arms are rendered as half-tone images, overlaid a silhouette of the same arm. Each arm is a different color of the pride rainbow, with the addition of black and brown, which are recent additions to the pride flag to honor Black and Indigenous people of color who are LGBTQ. This is all over top of asphalt, a close-up photo in black and white. I first came across this text, "An Army of Lovers Cannot Fail," in 2004 on a San Francisco Gay Freedom Day poster from the 70s, while doing research at the San Francisco GLBTQ Historical Society. Later that year, I began a collaborative quilting project using the same statement. advocating the politics of collective production and sexual liberation. This text lives through me and my work and continues to acquire new layers of meaning. So I'm going to share some images across time and space to talk about the use of hands and fists as visual symbols. The hand that will rule the world, one big union. This is from 1917. A giant fist that is formed by the collective efforts of industrial laborers, depicted in a line drawing as white cis men working as miners in steel and shipping. Industrial workers of the world had the goal of not only advocating for their rights as laborers, but also overthrowing capitalism, creating a workers' cooperative republic. They envisioned a general strike. The workers would lock out the employers and allow for the peaceful takeover of the means of production. Workers would then control industry and use the world's resources to benefit the many instead of enriching the few. La lutte continua. This one's from 1968. A line drawing of a fist emerging out of a brick smokestack and an industrial building with the text, "The fight continues," in red ink. In Paris, from May to June of 1968, art students and other protesters met to discuss the events of the day and respond with new posters they would print and paste up in the streets at night. 1968 was a time of global protest, from Italy to Mexico, Japan to the UK, the US, and beyond. Students and workers demonstrated in mass numbers, held strikes, and occupied universities and factories. They rejected the old structures of unions and political parties, embraced intergroup solidarity and collective decision-making. So the next two slides I'm going to show are also from the same year. This is a black and white photo of a medal ceremony at the Olympics in Mexico City in October of the same year, 1968. Gold medalist Tommy Smith and bronze medalist John Carlos each raised a black gloved fist during the US national anthem. Their fists represent solidarity with the Olympic Project for Human Rights revolt of the Black athlete, which had actually called for Black athletes to boycott the Olympics. Their goal was to expose how the US used Black athletes to project a lie about race relations, both at home and internationally. 3 buttons. One button is red and yellow, 2 fists in the center, positioned as if ready to fight. Text surrounds the image, reads, "Stonewall means fight back," with an exclamation point. "Smash, lesbian and gay oppression." This one commemorates the Stonewall Riots, which took place in June of 1969. Fed up with regular harassment, riots erupted following a police raid targeting queer and trans bargoers at the Stonewall Inn in Manhattan. These protests marked the beginning of the LGBTQ movements for civil rights and is the impetus for celebrating Pride. The button in the middle has white with purple text reading "Gay Liberation" in all caps with a line drawing of a fist. The third button is navy with white text reading "Gay Liberation Front" with a white fist in the middle with a symbol composed of 4 interlocking circles, mandorla, with 4 arrows coming out of the nexus point. News of Stonewall spread and inspired people across the country to organize, forming groups like the Gay Liberation Front, who created spaces for coming out, celebrating sexualities, changing public perspectives, and challenging laws. Now we're going to fast forward to the 90s. This is a black and white poster for the touring punk band The Need, made by artist Rachel Carnes, who was one of the members of the band. On the left is the full poster, and on the right is a detail of the middle section showing different hand positions for non-phallic sex. The poster is a riff on queer sex using the form of a vintage boxing poster. Now we'll move on to some work I've made collaboratively with Dana Bishop Root as part of our project General Sisters, investigating connections between environmental racism, food justice, and access to land. We've been using hands in our print work as symbols of generosity, mutual aid, invitation, and interconnectedness. This is a print made on a dish towel with two hands in an open palm position on opposite ends of the towel. One hand is magenta and the other is ochre. In between the hands are two columns of text. One column is excerpted from a World Food Summit report with edits and reads, "Food justice exists when all people at all times have physical and economic access and the means of production and choice to abundant, safe, nutritious, and delicious food to meet their dietary and cultural needs and pleasure for an active and healthy life." The other text is upside down, is excerpted from farmer, educator, writer Leah Penniman. "Uphold everyone's right to land, honor the people who grow our food, eliminate food apartheid, support farmers of color, and invest in local food economies." The towel is hanging on ropes in front of our garden. This is a detail shot of two wallpapers we created. "Singing We Must Rage" is hanging in front of sistering pattern installed at the Kohler Art Center. Includes graphics we produced over the past 8 years, tea bags, dish towels, posters, banners, and various documents. It includes quotes by Vandana Shiva, Tourmaline, and Leah Penniman, and explores values around protest, collective action, community health, and food justice. Here, hands are working, holding, reaching, feeling, resisting, fighting, being. And now we are back where we started. A color photo of my billboard institute along Route 119 between Youngwood and South Greensburg. All right, thank you.
We still can't hear you, Sheila, unfortunately.
All right. Well, it looks like I'm back. That was really beautiful, and I loved seeing all the different influences from the previous LGBTQIA documents and pins and just the history there. That's really tremendous. Okay, so let's see. Does anybody that has tuned in have any questions? We'll start with other questions first. Now, do either of you, have you two worked together on works in the past?
On artworks?
Yes, together, collectively.
You mean
no?
No, we talk together. We talk together, but we have not created things together.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, we definitely have the rainbow formalism as a connection between our works. Yes. And also I was excited to learn the term mandorla tonight.
Yeah. And I think we're both operating out of, social justice ideas and motivations. So yeah, there are lots of commonalities that way too.
That's fantastic. So what led you to the Billboard Project? I know you both just mentioned that your social justice work sort of inspires the work that you presented here. How did you hear about the project? What led you to it? Did you have an idea immediately? Or did it take a minute to sort of develop?
I think I either got an email from the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council, maybe. I'm not sure how I first heard. And I mean, I think I've even said this somewhere in my cover letter, but I'm actually generally not in favor of billboards. I don't interrupt the landscape, but they exist and they are another forum. And it would be nice, if they have to exist, for them to have some alternative messages to the ones that I've seen driving on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. And in terms of how that idea, I mentioned the minute I heard about it, and it doesn't normally work for me like this, really, that Merce Cunningham image just popped into my head for some reason. I don't know why, but that it came easily to me from that. Yeah.
That's a beautiful image.
For me, I'm hearing an echo. I had already developed a proposal for a public art piece that was to celebrate Stonewall, the anniversary of Stonewall for Pride here in Pittsburgh. And so when I heard about the Billboard project, I was really excited to translate this design that I had already developed, but hadn't, it wasn't selected for this other public art piece. I was really excited, actually, and excited. I love billboards as sites for art and as sites for messaging and communication. So I was really excited about that. So I just translated my piece for the thinking about the billboard.
All right, so it looks like we have a question in the comments. Can Ginger say more about the hands and fists on their billboard?
Sure, yeah. Maybe
putting you on the spot a little bit.
Well, I guess what I could say is that this is kind of, related to what I shared earlier, but it's really about embodying the spirit of Stonewall and gay liberation, as well as other, so many other ongoing social justice movements. The arms are representations of humanity, mutual aid, human interconnectedness, and protest, receptivity. So,
it's funny, Ginger, that it just occurred to me looking at it again and seeing the fine silhouette, but also seeing them sort of detached from the bodies and coming in from above and below, that to me, they also allude a little bit to kind of sacrifice. And, unfortunately, the hands up, don't shoot gesture, all in that gesture, but the way they're kind of isolated, it just took on these other connotations to me too, because, all of these struggles, they're not easy. And there are often, people who get sacrificed,
Wow. So it makes you think of mortality. Wow.
Now it makes me think of that too.
Well, no, but I mean, it's not this, because of your palette, it's not initially somber at all. It's much more celebrative. But it just occurred to me, also the asphalt too, because they're detached. They're also kind of, placed against this flat ground plane.
Wow. Yeah.
But
yeah,
that also means like being in the streets too, which, has both negative and positive connotations.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I chose the asphalt for that reason of, the literal kind of like depiction of like the symbol of being in the streets.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if you can see this, but there is this like crack that runs in between of the asphalt, and to talk about interconnectedness and bridging across differences and things like that.
Yep.
All right, so we have a question that came up. Let's imagine this project without the public art component. Do you think your work would be any different if it was displayed only at museums, galleries, or educational institutions?
Well, for me, like this billboard, this billboard for me, my design is much more graphic than I typically work, and more photographic. I mean, I do use photographic references, and I tend toward the graphic, flat, linear designs. but not to this degree. And usually I have at least some hand painted element in all of my work. And this is totally print and photographic. So it's in that sense. And like I said in my talk, I don't normally work with figures. So there are a lot of differences, and yet, you know, with my whole sort of discussion of the mandorla and the circle, those are elements that I have used. So there is something carrying through, but it took a different tack. And also something on that scale. I don't normally work on that scale, you know, something that could be read. This one is for the indoor presentation and the lights, which we haven't seen yet. And then the more horizontal one is for the billboards, the exterior billboards. But yeah.
Yeah, I think similarly, the way I approached making this image was thinking definitely of the scale, and then the possibility, like the time frame of somebody actually seeing this, like driving or walking past a billboard, and that somebody would maybe look up from, you know, looking forward through the windshield and look over to the side for some reason, and they would see this billboard. They would only see it for 1 second to however long. So thinking about how to simplify an image, how to make something recognizable. And for me, I used advertising language. I borrowed from that. So yeah, this is an entirely digital piece that, you know, was designed so it could be printed at a large scale like that and read at a large scale. So
I think it's so interesting to have to deal with the contradiction of billboards, which typically are seen in a fleeting moment. I mean, yes, you could be walking and it could be a slower viewing, but generally people see them in their cars. And it's usually a fleeting moment. So you want the image to be kind of immediately taken in. And often advertising wants to insist that there's an immediate message and that it's super clear. But I think that the billboards vary in a wide degree as to how overt or direct they are in their message. Some are very clear and others are much more ambiguous. And I think they both work in their own ways to kind of get people thinking, like, okay, what does that mean? Why is it there? Who would have done that? Or thinking about it each time they encounter it, perhaps with a different reaction, so that it still unfold over time, even though billboards are typically meant to be really experienced in a very immediate way.
All right, it looks like we have a question specifically for Susanne. What drew you to the images of the dancers? Does dance influence other work you have done?
Yeah, it's funny because I honestly have gone to some live dance performances, but I'm not, you know, I don't subscribe to any company's, you know, season performance. This is on a personal note. I make digital birthday cards for people like every day. And that Merce Cunningham image started out for me as a birthday card to somebody. And that's why I was still in my head, and maybe why it popped in my head when I saw the Billboard call. But it just seems so perfect. And yeah, so I'm not a dance aficionado. I don't really know a lot about dance. And it was interesting for me to try to comb through internet images of other dance troupes after I figured I can't really use this Merce Cunningham image. You know, it wouldn't, if anybody dug deeper, it wouldn't work. And just really looking for images that clicked with the meaning that I wanted and trying to find movement that could be expressive. And I did have a conversation with Carolyn Dorfman, who is the director of that dance company. And when she read my statement about this, she said, I can't believe like you really describe exactly what we were after, this kind of connectedness and then this difference and coming together and this flow of energy and dispersion. And so it was just really nice that we both work with these different languages, but, you know, toward the same kind of meaning.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, finally. Oh, I have many questions for the two of you, and I can finally ask. Okay, when Susanne was talking, you were talking about, you know, being religious, and in your early drawings and works, you use the mandorla, right? The representation. But it, for you, was an intersection between the secular heaven and earth. I would like to know more about that secular heaven.
Well, I just saw that place of intersection. I've always been interested in dichotomies and absolutism, and how absolutism of any form or for any ideology has often actually ended up in total disaster and even atrocity. And so I've always been interested in like examining the binary, but how the binary can collapse or be denied. And so that intersecting space to me was very interesting. And also, you know, I said I'm not a religious person, but I was raised as a Catholic, and I'm totally in love with all of the art that arose out of especially early Christian art, Byzantine, medieval, manuscript illuminations. I mean, I love that stuff. And also it's very graphic, and I'm just drawn to that. So, you know, formally, I wanted to just adopt that kind of language. And that, when I discovered that thing about the mandorla, I just thought, oh, that's a really perfect kind of metaphor for how to deny these polar opposites, acknowledge them, but also collapse them simultaneously.
Thank you, Susanne. Okay, and now I have a question for both of you, because I want people to know about, and I want to know about, let's say, the early stages of your career, or perhaps when did you discover that you were going to dedicate your life to art? How did that happen? Was like this, like a certain moment in time? Was it because you went to an art gallery, because of your family? How did that come about? It's gonna be fair.
You go first this time,
Okay, this is a hard question. I mean, it's something that I keep on returning to, and art, and that I definitely have moments when I take breaks from it, or I figure out how I want it to, you know, how I want my relationship to art to change, it, you know, to exist in my life. It changes over time. But I guess it's just something that I keep on coming back to. It's kind of like I can't help it, but this is how I think and how I work. So
yeah,
And
it's hard for me.
When was it? Like, were you like a teenager, or when did you like discover that, okay, I want to be an artist. This is how my mind works. So this is something that has to be in my life.
You could go ahead, Susanne. I'm having a little trouble. I don't know what. Yeah.
There was no single defining moment. I'm the oldest in a family of 6. My parents are both language educators, professors, and taught in high school. But they always were bringing us to museums and giving us art books. And I took art in high school, and I still was undecided when I went to college. I thought I'm either going to go into psychology or art, or maybe become a civil liberties lawyer. Wow. And then I majored in art, and I wanted to go to Europe, but I didn't want to just be a tourist. So I applied for any grad program that had a program in Europe, and I got into Tyler. So I spent my first year in Rome. And I loved it. And so I just kept going. But ultimately, I think because of the way my family was raised, and I have 4 sisters and 3 of them are still artists. So it's definitely in our family. But I think with my parents' political activism, art was just another way of sort of probing beyond the surface appearance of things and trying to get at what's really behind the power or the reality or the injustice or whatever. My parents were very active in the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement. And I honestly think of making art, as both selfish and a generous act. You're totally in control of this world in your studio if you're a studio artist. But you're also like sharing your innermost thoughts and ideas and making them manifest. And I think that any artist, regardless of their subject matter, this really comes from the philosophy of Herbert Marcuse. And he talks about every artist violating the reality principle because you're representing a world that is other than the way it really is, and that simply that act of generating another world of how it could be or how it is and you don't want it to be, that you are reminding not yourself and your audience that things can be different. And so even that just inherently is a political gesture, whether you deal explicitly with political subject matter or not. So this kind of, all of this sort of fed into my becoming and staying an artist.
And you are a socially engaged artist, and I see that it's coming from your family too, right? So
Yeah.
And this is a question for both of you too. Do you think the artists, all of us, should be socially engaged? Do you think it's something that we have to do, or we should do?
No, I don't think that all art has to be socially engaged. And I think we all have to avoid the idea that everything has to be useful or instrumental, that we need a space for total escape, freedom, respite. And I know this sounds contradictory, but I do think all art is inherently political, but it doesn't have to be. You don't have to necessarily, be explicitly political or even socially engaged. However, I want to say that even if you are a still life painter, art by itself is not going to change the world. Artists are not just artists. Artists are parents, they're lovers, they're citizens in the world, and they operate in many spheres. And they're not divorced from each other, those spheres. So, I can be painting in my studio, but I can also be marching downtown or in DC, or giving money to causes that I favor. There are many ways to be activist. And, but I think we need space for all ways of being artists. And we need to preserve that space to do something for the pure joy and visuality of it as well. I like to look at a good abstract painting as much as I love to look at, Leon Golub or Nancy Sparrow or Kara James Marshall or Kara Walker, to just luxuriate in the beauty of something. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Beauty can be a call to action too. It's not, yeah, I'm just going in circles here. Sorry, Ginger.
Yeah, I guess I don't believe in shoulds. The word should, like, no one needs to do something. Everyone. I really believe in self-definition and self-identification, and like Susanne's saying, artists aren't just artists. They are, they are all these other people in the world also. So I think, yeah. Some people are going to be activists. Some people are not. Some people will be sometimes at some point in their lives. But yeah. There's room for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I have a question for Ginger.
Yes.
I noticed the hands are like a recurring element of your work. Were they apparent at your early work, and how did that theme enter the work? And and the other question I have is that have you always focused on that part of the anatomy, or you have used other elements too?
I guess I showed a few images from my collaborations with Dana Bishop-Root, our project General Sisters. And I think that's when I and we started using hands as part of our visual language. And it was really to talk about interconnectedness and to talk about labor, to talk about generosity, hand as an invitation. So that's how it really entered our work, and as a way also to show like a human presence. Yeah. And then, so we started using those in some of our prints, and then we used them later in a wallpaper piece. And most recently, they were blown up probably to like 5 feet tall. These giant hands that are on the windows on one side of a building, to really talk about touch and humanity, especially during a pandemic. How can we continue to remain connected while we are separate from each other, while we can't touch each other?
Wow. Is that here in Pittsburgh?
That is
in
Boston at Tufts University.
Okay. So I would like to know if, okay, does anyone have any additional questions? No? Okay. Well,
There's
what
one
more for both of you?
I think there's one more question that just popped up from somebody. I don't.
Well, what does Ginger do when she is in between working?
When I'm in between what?
Working, I think she said.
Working. Mushroom hunting, walking, cooking, swimming, walking, cuddling with my dog. Yeah, I like to spend a lot of time in the woods and in the kitchen.
And you have a garden, right?
Yes.
You have.
Yes, I like to work with soil.
Yeah. Okay. So Robert is saying, Susanne, when I looked at your dance circles, I felt that the empty center was the power position in the artwork. Did you consider that in doing it?
Well, I don't know if I saw it. Well, I don't see it as a single entity of power. I see it as a kind of a communal power of whether I see it as many lenses, many hues, a full spectrum, you know, and also as a kind of spectrum of energy. I mean, we think of, you know, color, you know, are basically, you know, light waves of different frequencies and different, you know, we could associate them with different energy levels. But so, yeah, it's an interesting question. Because if it's a power position, then the dancers become these protectors of that position, which could be good. but I don't like to think of power as isolated or confined. Well, I don't want it to be, rampant and, autocratic or anything. I don't know. I'd have to think about that more. That's a good question.
I don't think we have more questions. Do we have, well, what I was asking both of you, I know we have like a couple of minutes just. What is next for both of you? What are you working on now? I know life is very different right now. So
I'm working on a public art piece that's here in Pittsburgh, in Wilkinsburg, actually. I'm working with 9 Mile Run Watershed Association and the Center for Civic Arts on an environment and public health initiative that was put forward by the Office of Public Art. In 2019, we started. I started doing research, and it's a piece that really looks at and creates 3 access points to view the underground stream that runs through Wilkinsburg through 3 viewfinders that are actually replacing existing manhole covers. So that's what you see behind me.
I was going to ask what that wheel was back there.
Yeah. So, yeah, that will be happening this spring in 2021.
And as far as what I'm working on, I kind of wear a couple hats. I've sort of become a curator, and I have a show that's traveling around right now called When the Bough Breaks, which is artists who have a take on trees. There's, a poetic dialogue between Bertolt Brecht and Adrian Rich on what it means to talk about trees. And so I created a show that is now, it's just about to open, I think on the 16th at Penn State. It opened here in Pittsburgh. It went to York College, and it may go to Florida and elsewhere. My sisters and I also are in a show right now called Family Tree Whakapapa, which is in New Zealand, and that's a Maori term for, it's a very complicated term, but it's about genealogy and context and family and history, and that's traveling to Auckland. And then I'm working on a series of paintings called the Retraction series that are basically red carpets that have been retracted, and it's part of my ongoing work about the immigration and refugee crisis.
thank you, Susanne. Thank you, Ginger. I think
Welcome.
our hour is over. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank
I
you.
hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did for the part that I was able to be here. So if you have any questions about the project, please visit our website, Make Our Difference Our Strengths. So thank you so much. And thank you, Mona.
Thank you for the
Susanne
conversation.
and Ginger.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thanks, Maggie, for running everything backstage. And I hope you get to tune in again next month for our final Diversity Billboard Artist Talk. And make sure to check out the museum's website at thewestmoreland.org/events for more details and links to register for all of our upcoming virtual programs. All right. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.